The only way he could get this kind of an injury was to fall backwards, hit the back of his head, and then the resulting, energy forces going into his brain, into his base of his skull. His injuries were very substantial, and it's more probable than not that at some point he quickly became unconscious and was unable to do functional activities.
A brain surgeon breaks down Officer John O'Keefe's fatal injuries. Our power panel weighs in on his crucial testimony in Defendant Karen Reed's retrial. Plus, it's a huge day in New York City. We're expecting explosive testimony from rapper Kid Cudi in Diddy's sex trafficking case. And we're giving you a glimpse of what it's like to go inside of the courtroom using AI technology. We're showing you the testimony from Cassie Ventura's mom. Also this hour, the Holly Bobo murder case returns to the courtroom 7 years later. The convicted killer now asking for a brand new trial, claiming that he had nothing to do with her murder. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Thursday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. So we got a tremendous show planned for you. So let's get started as we always do, my friends. Grab that cup of coffee or tea, or if you're across the pond and it's lunchtime for you, whatever you're enjoying this afternoon. It's time for my opening statement. It's like something out of an episode of Breaking Bad, except it's not Walter White who's causing the explosion. I'm talking about rapper Kid Cudi's car getting blown up. It was blown up in his driveway. Coincidentally, after Diddy told Cassie that it would happen. She told the jury about it last week when she testified. And today, the jury's going to hear more about it from Kid Cudi himself when he takes the stand. I mean, just think about it for a second. Can you imagine your car getting blown up at your house? I mean, back in the day, relationship jealousy might have been settled with a good old-fashioned fist fight, right? And let me be clear, I'm not condoning fist fights, just making the point that jealous fury might be settled with something simpler. What happened to Cudi's car was a crime, arson. And if federal prosecutors can establish that Diddy had one of his agents go do it, then it counts as what is called a predicate crime. And that arguably falls underneath the alleged racketeering conspiracy charge against him. So let's go to school for a second. In order to legally establish the racketeering charge, the government needs to show that Diddy engaged in a pattern of criminal activity under the bigger umbrella of his business. Racketeering activities can be a wide range of serious crimes that are carried out via a business. So here, if Diddy did an arson by having one of his business employees go to Kid Cudi's house and orchestrate the car blast, then that can be considered a racketeering activity, a predicate crime. And if it's coupled with other crimes, it can strongly support the overarching racketeering conspiracy charge. Thank goodness Kid Cudi wasn't hurt in the car blast. And today, it will be only the testimony that's explosive. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, I want to give you your daily docket.
They all got outsmarted by Holly Bobo. Most of all, this defendant. He got outsmarted by her, and he got outsmarted by his co-defendants, because they weren't all supposed to fold. They weren't all supposed to start talking. Nobody does that to Zach Adams.
In Tennessee, Zachary Adams is going to be back in court at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. This guy's looking to get a new trial after his conviction for murdering Holly Bobo. In Florida, we've got OnlyFans model Courtney Clenny back in court. She's got a hearing today at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And in New York City, testimony is expected to resume at 9 a.m. Eastern in Diddy's sex trafficking trial. Now, let's go to your top story this morning. In Dedham, Massachusetts, testimony resumes in Karen Reed's retrial on Tuesday. But before court was recessed for the long holiday weekend, the Commonwealth called in a brain surgeon who testified about John O'Keefe's fatal head injuries. Dr. Zeke Wolf said that O'Keefe died from falling backwards and hitting his head on the frozen ground.
Did you have an opportunity to review photographs of a laceration to Mr. John O'Keefe's head?
Yes, I did.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether this injury, the laceration and the basal fracture, was caused by Mr. O'Keefe falling backwards on the ground?
My opinion is that that's what caused his whole injury.
After the fall, would Mr. O'Keefe, in your study and opinion, have died immediately?
No.
All right, so what do we think about the head injury conclusions made by the doctor? Let's bring in a doctor to talk about that. Board-certified forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee is with us, and high-profile attorney John Phillips is with us as well. Good morning to you both. So let's start with the doctor's conclusions. Dr. Wolf and what he told the jury. Dr. Banerjee, what do you say, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is totally consistent. He explained it very well. In my opinion, it was concise for a complicated mechanism, if you will. But falling back, hitting the hard ground, which when it's frozen is a complete unforgiving surface. And that causes the brain to bounce against the skull, both in the initial direction and the opposite direction. That's that coup contra coup that causes a lot of damage inside to the brain. And that is not immediately fatal, as he described. I watched his testimony and agree with him completely that this is not like a gunshot wound to the head or something that would take out vital structures. And so then we see it lining up with the state's case.
Yeah, we most certainly do. John Phillips, what did you think about that witness in terms of helping to establish the theory that the Commonwealth has put forth, that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car, knocked him off balance, fell back, hit his head on that hard ground, and later died?
I agree wholeheartedly and brought some friends this morning, Julie. So number one, we've got the skull, okay? So, you know, how the injury happens to the skin, how the injury happens to the brain is really important. And for your viewers, you know, the brain sits in a sac. And so the coup contra coup is where the brain is actually shifting due to the nature of force within that sac, and it causes an injury. Sometimes you see it, you know, as simple as a car crash, but, you know, that aligns with the prosecutor's case. You know, the fact that there wasn't blunt force trauma, you know, to the skull. There wasn't a bat. This wasn't an attack. This was consistent with all the other evidence that this was a fall precipitated by a motor vehicle.
All right, John, that's really helpful. Appreciate you bringing the prop to help demonstrate what happened here. Thank you for that. I want to play another clip from Dr. Wolf here. This is on direct examination. He's talking about John O'Keefe's body temperature. Let's listen.
As I recall, his core temperature was 80. 95 is very mild hypothermia. When you get to 82 degrees, you're in severe hypothermia. What happens when you're hypothermic, and I'm a neurosurgeon, but I can tell you that you get into multiple organ failure. Your heart starts to have problems. It can have arrhythmias. You're not breathing. And ultimately, at hypothermia, you also become unconscious and go into a coma-like state.
Dr. Priya Banerjee, I want to ask you about something that I've thought a lot about, wondering about this, and it's something very unpleasant, something I'm sure John O'Keefe's family has probably thought about. How much do you think he suffered during that time period?
I'm of the opinion that these massive head injuries they had, you know, from an impact, whatever that impact was, I can't predict it, but I think there would be at least a concussion type effect, if not loss of consciousness from that. And then he could be like physiologically alive, meaning his heart, lungs, brain are functioning, but I'm hoping he wasn't that conscious. Now, we know that he survived to become hypothermic, and there was evidence of hypothermia at autopsy, which I concur with how they were described. So his body is alive, but being conscious enough to feel it, I'm hoping was very limited.
I hope so too, Doctor. Thank you. I want to play another clip. This is from the cross-examination of Dr. Wolf. Let's take a look at that together now.
Raccoon eyes, the medical term for that, sir, is ecchymosis, right?
Correct.
Ecchymosis, raccoon eyes, does not cause a laceration to form on an eyelid, does it?
No.
Okay, so he's bringing up the point about there seemed to be a laceration on John's eye. John Phillips, I'm sure you remember this. I remember Hank Brennan telling the jury when they went on the jury view to pay close attention to an area at the top of Karen Reed's SUV. I don't know if you call it like a spoiler or whatever, something that like juts out. He's going to pay attention to that because it's going to matter later when it comes to the victim's height. And he said something along those lines, and it made me think, is his theory that that might have caused the eye injury? How concerned would you be as an attorney, John, when you have the doctor acknowledging, okay, the raccoon eyes and the blood pooling wouldn't cause that superficial laceration that we see? How might you explain it?
Yeah, you know, anytime you have an expert, you can get the opposite expert. So, you know, when it's a battle of experts on things that are super specific, sometimes experts will disagree. But, you know, the broader story here is this: nothing else makes sense. You know, there's no reason to have broad reasonable doubt because everything lines up. And in civil trials, we take more liberties. We often spend more money, frankly, on experts and animations and the whole thing. And I've got shelves of these, you know, to try to line up and show a jury, you know, and I say, as I'm joking during jury selection or opening, I'm not a doctor, but I'll play one in this courtroom. Sometimes it draws an objection, but, you know, it all lines up with, you know, with the story, and certainly there's going to be, you know, reasonable differences, and jurors don't, you know, they're not so super specific unless it's a smoking gun that you know, there's room that they're looking for the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. Right. One laceration may not hold up the jury when they're thinking about the injuries and what makes sense as to how they were caused. Yeah, I love those demonstrative aids that you're showing, John. You know, perhaps this would have been a good case to bring some in. You're giving me ideas. I wish we would have seen some yesterday. So thank you for that. Dr. Priya, another question about that laceration to John's eye. And this was a theory I credit our incredible guest, Claudia King, who's a domestic violence expert. She's a police officer formerly, and she's going to be on later today. And she said last week, she said, you know, I've often thought that in that fight that we know John and Karen had in her car, that she could have hit him. She could have hit him, causing the eye injury there, and then the head injury subsequently happening thereafter. Do you think that's possible, Dr. Priya, based on what you saw?
I think that's a brilliant thought. So what I say is when I see someone at autopsy, I'm seeing everything in one snapshot, right? And if everything is, let's say an injury is hours old versus right before death, they're not going to appear that different. And so we're assuming all these injuries are related to one event, but they may not be. And I think that's an incredible point.
I appreciate that, Dr. Priya. Claudia is going to be on later this morning, so I will tell her that the good doctor concurs.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And, you know, and who knows, that may be where, I don't know where the Commonwealth is going. We obviously we don't know exactly yet, but maybe that's what Hank Brennan's going to argue in close. We'll see. That or maybe the top of the car. I'm just not sure yet. Here's what we'll do. We will leave it there for now, and of course continue our Karen Reed coverage as Court TV Live continues. And Dr. Priya, thank you. We have to let you go for now, but it's been really great having your insight on this trial, and always. John Phillips is coming with us. Please do the same at home. Here's what's next.
Did there come a time after this when Sean mentioned Scott's car?
Yes. He mentioned that when we were out of the country, that Scott's car would be blown up. He wanted his friends to be there to see it.
When you say he wanted his friends to be there to see it, who is he?
Sean wanted Scott's friends to be there to see the car get blown up in the driveway.
Sean Miss Cudi. You know him as rapper Kid Cudi. He's going to take the stand today in Diddy's federal case. We'll talk about it next. And is justice going to be undone in Holly Bobo's murder case as convicted killer Zachary Adams is fighting for a new trial?
Karen Reed, a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed!
We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
What happened that night? Are you not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer. Memorial Day Marathon starting Monday, 11:10 Central. Only on Court TV.
When, if ever, would Sean mention the freak-off videos to you?
He would mention them when he was upset about something. It was just a pretty common thing. One time I dated someone else. That is what it was all about. I'm going to put out 2 embarrassing videos of you. He just wanted to hurt me.
Now for what's trending in true crime, getting ready for day 9 of testimony in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial. And today, the jury is expected to hear from rapper Kid Cudi. Last week, Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, testified that she had a brief relationship with Cudi back in 2011. During her testimony, she said that when Combs found out about the two of them being together, he warned her to stay away from him. She says Combs then threatened to blackmail her and later allegedly arranged for Cudi's car to be blown up in his driveway. Now, before I bring in my power panel, let's take you to New York, where Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft is outside the courthouse with more.
Good morning to you, Julie. Today, federal prosecutors are expected to call Kid Cudi to the stand. He is expected to testify about the romantic relationship that he had with Cassie Ventura. During court proceedings on Wednesday, Sean Combs turning around during long sidebars that we had in court, and he would be head nodding to his sons. At one point, he was mouthing something to one of them. During these long sidebars, I noticed jurors just turning around and gazing out the window. They do have quite the view of New York City. It almost looks like a painting. Wednesday's proceedings ended with a former assistant to Sean Combs on the stand. Here he is making his way into the courthouse. George Kaplan, that's his name. He was testifying about the hotel bag. And in that bag, liquor, clothes, baby oil, Astro Glide. And he would set up the rooms for the freak-offs. He testified that he would use the credit card issued to him by Combs Enterprises to buy these supplies. We also heard from Special Agent Gannon providing more testimony about the raid on Combs' Miami mansion, in which they seized several items, 18 pairs of platform high heels, 3 cell phones, also recovered a Gucci bag containing cocaine, cash, a handgun, baby oil bottles as well were seized from his home. And we also heard from a forensic psychologist, Dawn Hughes. Here she is making her way into the courtroom. She was testifying about the trauma bond and how it can make a victim unwilling to leave a relationship. She explained why it sometimes takes multiple attempts for victims to leave abusive relationships. She said as the abuse becomes more severe, so do the coping mechanisms. Victims often numb themselves with drugs and alcohol. And Julie, court proceedings get back underway at 9 a.m. Eastern. That's the latest from Lower Manhattan. Kelly Craft, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks to Kelly Craft for that update. Now let's talk about what could come from Kid Cudi's testimony. How is it going to affect this case against Diddy? Let's bring in our power panel now. I have with us the Chief of Police at Talladega College, retired homicide detective as well, Chief Chris Anderson, and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, somebody who handles a lot of high-profile cases in New York, attorney Michael J. Brown, and media personality, artist, and rapper in his own right, Head Crack. Good morning to you all. All right, so let's take it from the top. Let's start with the story. When this happened, we're going back to 2011. Head Crack, I know you remember when this went down. Would you kind of take us back in time? What were people saying at the time? Was there speculation that this was maybe done by Diddy?
No, not really at the time. Like, you know, it was one of those things when you heard about it, it was just kind of like one of those urban legends, kind of like a rumor. And then around 2012, even going as far as 2014, I started to hear about it a lot more, and you started to hear, like, you know, who may have been connected to, and the name was, like, you know, loud and clear, Diddy. And, you know, and here we are, like, almost like 11 years later, and this is finally being brought to trial, which is crazy because you would think an allegation of this magnitude, right? You would think people would have investigated this sooner, as opposed to letting a whole bunch of, you know, charges stack up like one of those cartoon sandwiches before you finally bring somebody to court. So, you know, it's crazy. And I'm a big Kid Cudi fan, man. He didn't deserve that.
He's really talented. You're right, Head Crack. And yeah, and I love the point you made about there was no investigation. Did nobody call the police? Chief Anderson, that's where we want to bring you in. Your thoughts on that?
You know, Cudi's testimony today could be pivotal in this case as, you know, he's someone who's allegedly targeted due to his personal relationship with Cassie. This account could prove to be extremely pivotal and the jury more direct insight into the lengths that the defendant would go to in order to install that fear, exact control over her, and it's central to this prosecution's case. So his testimony today could be very pivotal and more than what I think people expect.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're absolutely right, Chief. So to be clear, when Cassie testified about this, she didn't go so far as to say that Diddy told her he did it or admitted that he did it. You know, we know he's cloaked in the presumption of innocence here. I want you to take a listen to exactly what she said, and let's do some analysis on the other side. Here we go.
Did there come a time after this when Sean mentioned Scott's car?
Yes. He mentioned that when we were out of the country, that Scott's car would be blown up. He wanted his friends to be there to see it.
When you say he wanted his friends to be there to see it, who is he?
Sean wanted Scott's friends to be there to see the car get blown up in the driveway.
Okay, is that enough of an admission there of sorts? Michael J. Brown, our attorney on the panel, what do you say?
Good morning, Julie. Yeah, I think it's going to be a very important piece of the puzzle. Clearly, nobody witnessed it, but there was an alleged admission that it was going to happen, and then you're going to have testimony that it did happen. So that's going to be real important. And it comes off the heels of Cassie's mom testifying, talking about this extortion for the videos. And now you have another incident where you have a controlling individual who is not happy that his ex is dating somebody else and blows up his car in retribution. So it's important, yeah. And I think it's going to be a good piece of the puzzle. Listen, there's a lot of baggage he comes with, this Kid Cudi, but I think the prosecution is going to bring that up on their direct. And at the end of the day, what's important is whether this car was blown up because of the fact that he's dating his ex-girlfriend.
Great points, Michael. Let's listen to another clip. Again, AI voice technology from Cassie's exact court transcript.
When Scott left Connecticut, what was the status of your relationship with Scott?
I had broken it off with him. It was just too much.
When you say too much, can you explain what you mean by that?
Too much danger, too much uncertainty of what could happen if we continued to see each other.
Okay, Head Crack, let me go back to you, please. Do you think people in the public even remember Cassie and Kid Cudi being together? Because I feel like so many of us associate her with Diddy, of course. We remember her with Diddy for a long, long time. But it was kind of like, did that happen? Was that ever talked about?
It was such a blip in time that I don't think people really super focused on it because, you know, what a lot of people also seem to not remember as well is that, like, Cassie wasn't a huge music artist. Like, she had, like, one song, they had 2 videos, and then maybe a second song. So it wasn't a name that you saw, like, in the blogs and the tabloids a lot, and it wasn't until she started dating, you know, Puffy exclusively that you started to hear her name a lot more. And, you know, and Kid Cudi, he was one of those guys who got around. Like, if you look at his Who Dated Who Carfax, you know, he dated quite a few people. So somebody as beautiful as Cassie, like, you know, wasn't necessarily, like, far off the road from somebody you would see him associated with. So, you know, it was just a fly-by-night kind of situation.
Sure. I appreciate that, Head Crack. Michael J. Brown, a question for you, please, that I was thinking about. Not that Kid Cudi, you know, needs the money, but we know we see so many crime victims go through trial, you know, never get to recoup their losses. But here I was thinking, oh, if this case is proven, if they prove the racketeering conspiracy charge and if they prove this arson was one of the predicate crimes, could those government prosecutors, if the jury believes it, if Diddy's convicted of it, could they then order Diddy to pay restitution to Cudi for that car?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that could be something. The judge could order restitution as part of a sentence. I don't think that's the big deal for Cudi. You know, whatever the value of the car is. But I think Cudi, listen, he'll get his profile, as big as it may be now, clearly as a witness here, it could elevate his profile even further, believe it or not, and he could certainly gain off of just his testimony. But yeah, I think restitution would be ordered by the court if, in fact, he's convicted of that charge.
Appreciate that. We'll leave it there for now. We're going to be talking a lot about Diddy all throughout the day. Michael and Chief Anderson are coming with us. Head Craig, we've got to say goodbye to you. You got to go to work, and you've got more great music to make. I want to shout out your album, Microdose, out now. It's awesome. Check it out. Thank you for your time and your insight this morning. And still to come here on Opening Statements, more Diddy coverage. Take a look.
And what else, if anything, happened related to Sean Combs and Cassandra's relationship at or around the same time you received this email?
It was understood that he was going to need $20,000 to recoup money that he had spent on her because he was angry that she had a relationship with Scott Mess Cudi.
Did you hear about this? Diddy allegedly extorting Cassie's mom, her mom, for $20,000. We'll take you in the courtroom using AI. Plus, could Holly Bobo's killer get a new trial? Zachary Adams' former girlfriend gets grilled on the stand. Welcome back. This morning, we're giving a voice to victims as the man convicted of killing 20-year-old nursing student Holly Bobo continues his fight for a new trial. Bobo's family has to now relive the trauma of her murder all over again with this big hearing. She went missing back in 2011 in rural Tennessee. Her remains not found until 3 years later. Zachary Adams was convicted of killing Bobo. He went to a jury trial. And one of his co-defendants, a guy named Jason Autry, testified against him, but has now recanted what he said about him and his role in the homicide. So now, Adams is really hanging his hat on that and pushing for a new trial. On Wednesday, his former attorney told the court that based on co-defendant Jason Autry's statements, he thought that Adams would be found guilty of Bobo's murder.
Attorney-client privilege is waived in this case. So when I ask you, did Zach Adams ever tell you, Mr. Simmons, I committed this crime?
Zachary Adams never told me or suggested to me that he committed the crime.
Did you ever ask him?
Not directly.
You had tried to talk Zach into pleading guilty.
I had given him my professional opinion as to the outcome of the trial.
Which was?
He would be found guilty unless Mr. Autry's testimony was rebutted. And that was my opinion. And given that, he needed to consider a resolution of the case, and he was very adamant that he was not going to plead guilty. As I understood the facts of the case at the time, I thought it very likely a jury would convict him. And if he was convicted, I thought it also very likely he would get a sentence of death. And given those facts, I think he had to consider what his options were. I did not tell him he had to plead guilty, no.
Wow, so we're talking about a capital case here. You know, this was so long ago, I didn't recall that. I just recall that this was such a huge case for the true crime community, something that seemed to shock so many people. It was hard to understand why anybody would want to harm this beautiful young lady. And now her family has the potential of seeing some of the justice undone. And did Zachary Adams' former attorney's actions help with this? Here we are, this push for a new trial. The legal term is post-conviction relief. That's what's technically going on here. Let's bring in our guest to break it all down, the chief of police at Talladega College and attorney John Phillips. Chief Chris Anderson, let me begin with you. What a mess this is with these people. I mean, you have guys that seem like really bad guys. One of them who seems like a terrible liar. How do you, as an investigator over so many years, how would you begin to tackle this if you were involved in trying to sort out if this man is really innocent and was put away for something he didn't do?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. You know, I've had cases, you know, of course I've worked homicide cases, but I've also worked on some post-conviction cases with reasonable doubt and beyond that. So when you have a case where a person is claiming that they were wrongfully convicted, as an investigator, you have to go back to the beginning of your case. Because all defendants in any case where they believe that where they're saying that they're innocent, they utilize, most of the time they utilize the same verbiage. You know, I had ineffective witnesses and you know, the witnesses, ineffective defense counsel. And then you have some that will say, hey, my co-defendants are recanting their statements. That's with every case. But there's a lot that goes in conjunction with this conviction. There's a lot of admissions. There are a couple of confessions, quote unquote, if you will. As an investigator, you're required to go back and look at that information, especially if you're an investigator that's bringing in fresh eyes to this case. Go back, look and see how the original testimony was given. Look at the original statements and see how they mesh up with the physical evidence in this case. There's not a lot of physical evidence in this case. It's all circumstantial, but circumstantial evidence is evidence. And you have to look at it all when you are talking about giving some relief to a person that's been convicted. And I must mention this. I hate it for the victims in this case. The victim's family in this case. You know, they have to go through this entire ordeal again after they've not only gone through the investigation, gone through finding the remains of their daughter, and listening to this person that's on the witness stand talk about how their daughter was murdered. And then this is reopening just that box that maybe somehow they were able to put away after years and knowing that the person that was responsible was convicted.
Chief, beautifully said. Thank you for that in such helpful insight. We don't know that we can trust what these guys are saying. These guys that are, you know, they're criminals. They either pleaded or were convicted, you know, criminals, and we're supposed to believe this. I love what you were saying about how a lot of times the criminals will use the same verbiage, the same kind of things, the same arguments. And John Phillips, the one criminal we're not going to hear from is Zachary Adams. Apparently, his lawyer representing him in this process has advised him, you know, not a good idea to talk. They've conveyed to the court he's not going to be testifying. Smart move, counselor? What do you say?
Yeah, you keep the Fifth Amendment as long as you possibly can, because there's this process, there's another trial, there's a possibility for, you know, because this is capital, other crimes, recharging, you know, not under double jeopardy, but certainly some other similar, you know, issues tied to this. You know, that's what I would recommend. You know, this one's fascinating because, like in Joe Exotic's case, or in some of the cases we have nationally where there was a movement, there was a reason why facts needed to be looked at again, and you know, reason I wrote a 300-page motion for a new trial in Joe Exotic's case showing different evidence. But but here it's just, you know, really based on a few new findings of evidence, but it's pretty important. You know, perjury is perjury.
Sure, great points, John. Let me show you both another clip from this hearing this week. A retired TBI agent, this case happening in Tennessee, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. His name is Joe Walker. He took the stand. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
If there is evidence that cannot be manipulated, that Zach Adams was not a part of this crime, you want him out of jail, don't you?
If Zach Adams was in jail unnecessarily, sir, I couldn't sleep at night. I can promise you that.
Okay. Chief Anderson, what do you think about that retired agent's statement there?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that portion of his statement. Yeah. Nobody, no human being, no police officer, no investigator who believes in the oath and creed that you took as a law enforcement officer wants to see a person who's been wrongfully convicted in prison. Nobody wants, that's not justice. Justice is seeing the right person convicted of the crime in which they committed and having the evidence to prove such. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with what he's saying, and kudos to him for saying so. There are some other issues that I have with some of the investigators in this case, but yeah, I absolutely agree with that statement.
Thank you, Chief. I feel like I'd be remiss to not follow up. What issues, if you can share briefly, did you think it was a shoddy investigation or?
Sure. There was an original investigator on this case who saw or believed that there was another person who he was investigating in reference to this case was involved in the murder. He never believed that the defendant or the defendants in this case were the ones who actually committed the murder. So as I researched his investigation during this case, it appears to me that he had tunnel vision throughout the entire investigation. So his credibility, his information that he issued, I just have a problem with it, because one thing that you can't have as an investigator is tunnel vision. That's where wrongful convictions happen.
You're right, Chief. Yeah, the man you're talking about, Terry Britt, was that suspect. He was a sex offender, and he was said to be in the area at the time of Holly Bobo's murder. We know that there was a sexual assault done on Holly Bobo as part of this heinous crime and her murder. And so, yeah, you're right, never charged, and certainly a cloud of suspicion that was there at one point around this guy. We'll have to leave it there for now, but I know we'll continue talking about this, and we don't expect a decision anytime soon, so it gives us more time for analysis. We have to let you go. Chief Chris Anderson, always a pleasure to have your expertise. Thank you so much. Attorney John Phillips, thank you for your insight and expertise every Thursday morning. We get to see you, so we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Still to come here on Opening Statements, we're going to talk more about the Diddy case, but as we go to break, we want to take a moment to remember the victim in this case, nursing student Holly Bobo. This beautiful young lady had such a bright future ahead of her. She wanted to devote her career to helping care for other people. She was 20 years old, vivacious, beloved, had a beautiful spirit, and her family misses her dearly. We haven't forgotten about her here at Court TV. We'll be right back.
As Sean Diddy Combs faces a federal jury, Court TV's Kelly Craft is live from New York.
It was an emotional day in court.
With every development, the Diddy sex trafficking trial. Live updates on Court TV.
How can anybody think I'm guilty? I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Trial and error. Why did OJ win? Marathon begins Saturday morning, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
Now for what's tipping the scales, stunning testimony inside of Sean Diddy Combs' trial as Cassie's mom, Regina Ventura, is called as a government witness, and she recalls a jaw-dropping fight between her and Diddy. Cameras aren't allowed, so through AI, we're showing you what went down. The audio's AI, the words are from the transcript. Take a listen.
Do you recognize the photographs?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted in those photographs?
Cassandra is depicted in all the photographs.
And when were those photographs taken?
Christmas Eve Day, 2011.
Who took the photos?
I did.
Why did you take these photos of Cassandra in December 2011?
Because she was bruised and I wanted to make sure that we memorialized it.
What, if anything, did Cassandra tell you about the source of the bruising?
That she was beaten by Sean Combs.
Was December 2011 the first time Cassandra told you about Sean being physical with her?
Yes.
Now directing your attention to August of 2016. Did you travel to Los Angeles in that month and year?
Yes, we did.
What happened earlier that day?
Cassandra was out with Sean, and he stole her phone.
How do you know that?
Because she came and told me.
What did you do?
I called the police.
What, if any, interactions did you have with Sean that same day that Cassandra's phone was stolen?
We had a bitter argument outside her apartment building. I was yelling, screaming, and trying to hit him.
My. Let's talk about this. Let's bring back in high-profile criminal defense attorney Michael J. Brown. Michael, what did you think of Cassie's mom's testimony?
Julie, that's powerful testimony. Now you're humanizing Cassie. You have her mom come in. Mom is now corroborating that there's additional evidence of injuries to her daughter besides what we saw in the hotel room video, which was extremely powerful. So now she's taking pictures. Those are introduced into evidence. And you also have the incident or the testimony about the extortion with the video, where P. Diddy wanted $20,000 in exchange for the video. Obviously, he didn't want the $20,000, but he wanted to make sure she knows that he's going to put this out there to the public and show what's going on. So more of the controlling, domineering P. Diddy, and it's important evidence.
Right, Michael. So legal question for you. So Regina Ventura testified that they wire transferred the money, that Diddy had a bookkeeper reach out to them, that Diddy said that he wanted $20,000, as you noted, because he said that was all the money he had spent on Cassie, and he was mad that she's dating someone else, Kid Cudi. And so days later, she said it came back to her, no explanation. Still an extortion?
Well, yeah, the fact that he returns it, I don't think is important. I think, you know, hey, you give me the money in exchange for me not disclosing this video, and that's the crime. The fact that he returns the money afterwards, I don't think that's going to go a long way. But it goes to the big part of, obviously, this racketeering case, and that's another piece of the puzzle for the government.
Right, Michael. A great point. And, you know, many years ago, Fortune reported that Diddy was a billionaire. I don't know if he still is now, probably close to it, but may have had some big legal bills in there. How do you think the jury received that Cassie's parents had to take out a home equity loan to pay this rich guy?
Yeah, it is, like I said, another piece of the puzzle. You know, they're enamored. People are enamored with celebrities. So the jury sits there and they come in and they see it's P. Diddy and they're enamored. And I think that's why we talked earlier about showing that video really early in the trial. That being enamored sunk real quick because now you have this horrific video of the hotel room, and every single witness now has just chipped away at P. Diddy, at his character, his reputation, and his actions. And I think now they're so far off of that enamored aspect, and it just helps reinforce what the government's trying to portray P. Diddy as.
Yeah, such great points, Michael. Now, one last thing I want to ask you about some of the optics. We know that attire, the look is really important. I'm sure you go over these things with your clients all the time for trial. Diddy's been in sweaters every day. Our team has seen him, with the pressed white collar shirt underneath, crew neck. His hair is totally gray. He's got some facial hair that's gray. Thoughts on that look, quickly?
Well, I think they're trying to make him a little more mature so that it kind of gets away from these incidences that you're talking about. It's a calculated decision. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm sure there was thought that was put into it.
Definitely. Michael J. Brown, we got to let you go to court. You got cases to win. Thank you so much for your insight and expertise. We'll see you next Thursday morning. And that's all for opening statements, my friends. If you like the episode, watch it again, share it.